We are amongst the best Haftorah portions in the cycle right now. If you remember a couple weeks ago, I mentioned, if you were here on Shabbat morning or on a Friday night, the 3 Haftorot of rebuke leading up to the Shabbat of rebuke or Shabbat Chazon, when the Israelites are really chastised by the prophets, and that those 3 weeks end when Tisha B'Av begins. After Tisha B'Av, after the 9th day of Av, which commemorates the destruction of the temples in Jerusalem, we switch gears from Haftorot of rebuke to Haftorot of comfort, which started last week when Rabbi Sharf read from the 40th chapter of Isaiah, Nachamu, Nachamu Ami. Be comforted, my people. It's hard to tell people who are in despair, who feel like they're at the bottom of a pit, who feel like there's darkness all around, who are in a depression, physical, mental, emotional, or for Jews who know in our hearts that there are our people in dungeons and tunnels, in captivity. It's hard to tell people like us, be comforted. I mean, Isaiah had a very heavy load. If you think about it, he was in Babylonia. The Israelites had been exiled around the 6th century. That means they were all kicked out of Israel. They were all kicked out of the land of Israel, and they went to a place called Babylonia, which is now called Iraq. And they were there for about 50 years. And it must have been hard for Isaiah to go tell these people who got their tochuses kicked out of the land of Israel and sent east to Babylonia, to go and say, don't worry. Nachamu, Nachamu, be comforted, my people. But some of the best words, as I said, come from these Haftorot of consolations. We know the feelings of the 3 weeks before last week. We know the feelings of the bad news. All we get is bad news. That's all we get. It's hard enough some days to get up out of bed and turn on the TV without wanting to, I don't know about you, but get nauseous. Like, you don't have to be an empath to feel bad. Let's see what Isaiah says this week and see if it helps at all. Because one of the things that we do when we start to feel really in a dark place, one of the things that we do, or maybe I should say rather, one of the things we don't do, we don't read Scripture. We don't read from our Haftorah. We don't read from our Torah. It's got good stuff in it. Isaiah was not just a prophet. Isaiah was a really, really, really comforting guy. And so in this week's Haftorah portion for Ekev, right at the beginning, see if that feeling of dread and fear that you may have, like, does God exist? Maybe God doesn't. If God did, then why is God doing this? Here's what Isaiah says to all of those questions. This is a lesson in fundamental Jewish theology. Reform, conservative, doesn't matter. He says, Tomer Tzion, Azveni Adonai va'Adonai shechacheni. The eternal God, the people of Israel say, he says, you say, the eternal has forsaken me. My God has forgotten me. Does that feel or sound familiar? When you're having a bad day, when things are dark, when you lose a loved one, when a kid gets sick, God has left me. God has abandoned me. Friends, our ancestors said these words 3,000 years ago. Find comfort. Can a mother ever forget her child? Isaiah says. Can a mother ever stop loving the child of her womb, of her adoption, of her whatever? Can a mother lose love of a child? That's a rhetorical question. Even these could I forget, but I will not forget you. Indeed, I have inscribed you on the palm of my hands. Your safety is continually in my thoughts. Your builders drive out to hurt you. And those who have wrought you will also depart from you. Your ruins, the bad times, the buildings that have fallen, the wars, the terrorism, the agony, those ruins, your abandoned places, your desolate land, shall soon be crowded with people, while those who sought to devour you shall be far off. Then your children, the ones that you have mourned for, shall yet say into your ears, this place is too crowded for us. Make room for us to dwell in it. These words this week, last week, and the next few weeks as we lead up to Rosh Hashanah are meant to do two things. Number one, give us some perspective before we get into Elul, the month when we start to think about Teshuvah. And number two, to really get into your kishkas. God has not abandoned us. God has not abandoned us. I know you feel that way. I know you're mad at God. God can take your anger. And I know that you may not believe in God because you want to believe in a God who can intervene and intercede into your darkness and bring the light, but that will come. We are not in a permanent condition, Isaiah says. God has inscribed us on the palms of God's hands. Bad things have happened. Bad things do happen. Bad things will happen. But the covenant with God, our relationship with God, whether you believe in God or not, whether you accept God or not, whether you pray and worship to God or not, or whether you have faith in a God of justice and compassion and peace and all that good stuff, bad things will happen. But God does not change. And they will be okay. We will get to the other side. We will, because of that love, be one and at peace, so that there's so many kids running around Israel, metaphorically, symbolically, literally, that there's no room for them. There'll be so many. And we're going to make do with that really good service when that happens. Read Isaiah. I invite you to read all of these Haftarot. They give me a sense of hope. They help me a great deal, and I hope they will help you as well. Shabbat shalom.